We are recording. I'd like to recognize our UAS Chancellor, Dr. Aparna Palmer. Aparna, you want to give a little wave there? For those of you who don't know her, please get to know her. I know that one of her goals is to meet as many members of our Juneau community as possible. Online, I know we've got some folks tonight from Ketchikan joining in, including our new provost, Dr. Scott Billingsley, who told us he was going to be online. Hi, Scott. Tonight from Ketchikan with our UAS Ketchikan campus director, Dr. Bill Urquhart. So hi, Bill. Hi, Scott. I hope you have you with us. We also have a new Sitka campus director this year. And so I don't know if Sitka's here with us tonight, but I want to shout out Jeremy as well. So it's really exciting when we get new leadership because we get new energy and new voices. And so I hope you'll take the time to get to know all of our new leaders. And now we are in for something truly special. It is my honor to introduce tonight's guest, Portland-based filmmaker Pham. I have so enjoyed getting to know this man over here. We've spent some time together having coffee and lots of talks. We're both artists. We've both spent time in film and television in what I call the weird, silly commercial world. Vu and I have had lots of time to chat about those things. Vu first arrived in Juneau on March 17th, 2020. He was telling me about that day, and he can tell you more about it, but literally the day that Governor Dunleavy issued the first COVID-19 mandate. Some of you might have read that online on our website. So when I first met Vu, he painted this really incredible picture for me. As we're going to see in this film, he's a really wonderful storyteller. I was so captivated. As a storyteller myself, I got sucked in right away. And what became this kind of unplanned visit quickly became such a turning point in his life. And again, he can tell you more about what it was like for him to wander these empty streets of Juneau. And those kind of haunting walks really changed his path and led him back to Vietnam and See Rose Ashes, this film that we're going to see. So I would like Vu to tell you a little bit more about that, kind of setting this film up for us. But he's now reconnected. He's got a couple communities, right? Juneau's his community, Portland's his community, and he's now reconnected with Vietnam. We're going to watch this film together as a group. And then afterwards, I will have the privilege of moderating a conversation with Vu. So I'm going to start off by asking him some questions, which he will then answer, and we'll have a conversation here back and forth. And then there'll be some time at the end for you all to ask any questions that you have. And we'll come around with mics so that folks online can hear your questions. So please join me in welcoming filmmaker Pham.
Thank you very much, Juneau community. How's this buzzing sound? That seems like the right distance. Okay. Yeah, it is such a deep honor for me to be able to share my work with the faculty and maybe some students here at the school. I don't know if there are any students, but they'll come any minute now. They're late, just like young people are always late. But they're on the way. And of course, a community of some friends, and as well as folks that I'm sure I'll have the wonderful opportunity of getting to know better tonight after the film and we have our discussion. I just want to say a couple of quick things, some notes for you. One is that the film you're about to watch is a work in progress, so there's not going to be any credits for that reason and other reasons that I won't bore you with. Second, there are some reenactments in the film, slivers, very slight slivers of it. A good majority of it is factual documentary, but there are some things, because I didn't have footage of, I went ahead and recreated. So just know that, and I'm sure after the film, a few folks may have a few questions about that, but I wanted to point that out. And just on a personal note, I wanted to say that since I've had the privilege of being a frequent visitor to Juneau, and sometimes a long-term visitor. I have met some of the most gracious, generous, and compassionate people that I've ever met in my life, and I truly mean it. And I've also had the privilege of living in a place that is one of the most beautiful places on earth that I have seen. So to the people of Juneau and to the surrounding beauty, I thank you very much. And without further ado, a work in progress of Seabrow's Ashes.
Everybody online and in the room. So as I said, we're going to start with a series of moderated questions that we have thought about as a team in arts and sciences that we were really, after watching the film, that struck us and that we really wanted to ask Vu to start off with. And then maybe it'll give you all some time to think about the questions that you have. And then we will open it up to the audience. Okay, so Vu, also thank you again.
Thank you.
For allowing us to screen your film here at UAS.
Don't pirate this and share it with anybody. Done. Just
Well, that is actually part of it. So Vu, and this isn't part of the sort of Q&A, but Vu's still working on the film, which is really exciting. And maybe at the end you can share your website, because I think it's a way for the audience to follow the progress of this film. Vu really wants to turn it into a feature, which is super exciting as an artist. I know that I want to follow that progress. So at the end, maybe you could go ahead and share that website. So the first question that we have is, in this film, you are simultaneously the director, the narrator, the interviewer, and then also the subject. How did you navigate those shifting roles, and what did they allow or complicate for you creatively?
Well, first, it's about the cultivation of a ginormous ego. So if you don't know how to do that, then that's not going to work for you. So you got to have a huge ego. No, I say that in jest, but I also mean that obviously, you know, there's a deep level of self-interest in playing all of those roles. There's a, you know, a kind of cling onto certain aspects of the creative process that is, let's just, you know, call it control. But there's also self-experimentation involved. And so when I first started making films in 2010, I borrowed heavily from personal experiences and used those things as a foundation for my work. I can't tell you exactly why. Instinctively, that was the direction that I went. And perhaps as this discussion goes on, the reasons for that may sort of emerge. I think there are definitely some interesting reasons for that. But because I had a foundation already of using autobiographical material in order to essentially augment and bend and exaggerate, or, you know, make fantastic stories that were rattling around in my mind, I already had kind of a foundation for playing multiple roles and using autobiography as part of the artistic element. And so when I shifted towards documentary, the separation then became that the material was no longer something that I needed to essentially lie about. So I don't, and when I use the word lie, I like it because it really makes me think about what Werner Herzog had said about films. He said that basically films were a collection of lies to get to a truth. And our lives are sort of like that. You know, we tell certain stories to ourselves, we make things up. Sometimes our memory is faulty. And in being honest about all of those things and exploring those things, somehow they form some semblance of what we can identify to be a form of truth, capital, well, small case T, truth, but perhaps that leads to a bigger truth, capital T. So when I shifted towards documentary work, I no longer had to rely on the hallucination machine of my mind. I simply used, obviously, what was in front of me. And I guess this was like an arc in time that was very appropriate, because I had been for 10 years making things up about my life in a way. And then all of a sudden, a decade later, And then during the pandemic, while I was stranded here, I realized there was a truth about my life that I had actually been avoiding by making films that were fictionalizing things. And I said to myself, well, clearly I have some things that I'm still working through. So let's just go ahead and be honest about what those things are that I'm working through. And let's go ahead and in life begin the process of finding the man that murdered my mother. And then through that process, reconnecting with my community. And obviously, those are profound experiences that I've had. And I realized that what I had experienced was something that might be beneficial and useful for other people because we all have our individual unique suffering that we have to grapple with. And something about this particular story of suffering could be useful for folks.
Well, actually, then, as you say that, that sort of leads into another question. As you talk about as an artist or working through things as a creative, then how did the act of filmmaking itself offer new revelations or catharsis around the loss of your mother, if it did? Or was it more of an ongoing exploration, more than, a resolution?
Yeah, it's hard for me to think of what I am engaging in as offering resolution in the traditional sense. It's almost like what it is that I've opened some doors and I keep those doors open with my foot. And then I'm kind of like standing there and observing, the sort of field of experience or memory before me through the process of making films. And I stand there in the doorway still, not fully out there in the openness of kind of the abyss of trauma, I suppose, because sometimes going out there is, well, it's pretty horrifying to have to, invest yourself in that way. So I kind of see it, to put it more succinctly, as a kind of openness that I've achieved through this process, wherein I am in learning about my past and myself. And I do mean literally learning, because one thing that I did was I accessed the 580-page DA report on my mom's murder. And I read that cover to cover 4 or 5 months after it had been sitting in my filing cabinet, not entirely sure what I would do with it. So the openness that I'm talking about is just simply the acceptance of the tragedy and the fact that there is still yet so much more that I need to understand about it, but not like understand in the sense of like I need explicit data or information, but sort of even more time to reflect, because where I'm at in the journey so far is surprising to me. I've gotten to a place where I feel compassion for the man that did this, which is not what I set out to do. It was not an objective of mine. I'm not, like some Zen Buddhist monk and I had that in my sight. It just happened that way. And because of that, I think there's something more there, and I want to understand why I feel that way. So openness and compassion, which is not necessarily resolution, because there's still many, many unanswered questions about this that I'm working through.
I'm actually going to skip ahead because I think something you just said made me think about a question that we were going to ask later on in this discussion. But because you, I think, started talking, I think, more specifically about this man, some of the film resonates with this kind of idea of restorative justice, or having a conversation with this man, bringing past harms and traumas into dialogue with the present. So how does art fit into restorative justice?
Yeah, so I think that the way that I have engaged in the creative process and the dynamics and the mechanics of filmmaking sort of allows, and not specifically just filmmaking, but let's just say the creative process, or what I refer to as the artistic enterprise, what people might just call straight ahead art. All of those things are ways to access an emotional space that the nuts and bolts of operative work just doesn't necessarily allow. Basically, what you want to do is you want to be able to share the heavy load between the intellect, and the emotional, embodiment of who you are, your emotional constitution. And art is a way of being able to get a little deeper into your emotions, but still have a level of discipline about it, to where if you are observant and keen enough and patient enough, you start to pick up on things. And so for restorative justice to work, I think that there are more things that have to happen besides just the operational conditions of programs and practices. And so art is a way to share an experience with people, and storytelling particularly is a way to share an experience with people that perhaps maybe kind of loosens up, the kinds of mechanics of programs and practices a bit. And so for me personally, the restorative justice process has been about me taking this film to various audiences. So I've spoken at the University of Washington. I've spoken at now here in Portland at an event at the Reser, and a few other things. And each event has a particular focus. But in the focus of restorative justice, the thing that has come together that's really spoken to people is that I will screen the film and then I'll give a formal talk. And something about the amalgamation of that seems to really galvanize an audience. And so the restorative justice work I do then is I engage people in sort of a deeper and more complex engagement with tragedy, because ultimately, like, what we're trying to do is give people a way to frame the wounds, the trauma that they've experienced. I feel that the creative process can get to that space emotionally in a really deep way.
You've worked across a lot of different artistic modes. I'm an artist, right? For me, it's sometimes playwriting. Something will happen in my life and I immediately start writing a one-person show or a play. What is it about film in particular that felt right for you about maybe exploring these ideas about identity and memory? Why film?
Yeah, so film is such a fascinating thing. To me, it's sort of like the high water mark of culture, because what the hell else do human beings do that even matches up to this kind of absurd practice of essentially pouring the resources of a small municipality into a project in order to be ultra serious about making believe, so that the people who are the receivers of your make believe concoction then have an authentic emotional experience? I mean, what the hell is that? That is what I would describe as deadly serious play. We don't, because there's real things going on. People's financial lives and their careers are hinging on making believe that something that isn't really real is actually happening, so that an audience can have that experience and then feel real about it. Weird, really weird, But that kind of alien invocation of an artistic practice that's called filmmaking, to me, just kind of sits in a personal space of both love and adoration and just utter fascination with how the basically the replication or the mimicking of sensorial experience can be concocted through this really intricate web of collaboration between so many different artists and technicians, and then enter into a zone where, hearkening back to Werner Herzog, you get to tell people a bunch of lies so that they can get to a personal truth. And to me, man, that right there, that's the sauce. That's the magic sauce, is being able to convince people that this fantasy, this imaginary piece is true and real in a way that they feel inside of them. And so as a little boy, I had to essentially figure out a way to hide inside my own cocoon of reality. So one thing about having to witness my mother's murder, which until recently, I've never told people in a public setting about this, but enough time has passed where now I've made my peace with this part of my life. We all come from a place, and this just happens to be the place I came from. I feel no longer any shame or any embarrassment or any weirdness. This is just what happened, you know? So in having to witness my mother's murder and subsequently having some pretty insane trauma follow me afterwards, I had to figure out a way to live inside the imaginary worlds, first of the writers that I read as a little boy. So like William Slater and Beverly Cleary and Robert Newton Peck were like these children's books writers that I got lost in. And then at the same time, in this weird kind of paradoxical juxtaposition, I'm watching the films of Sergio Leone and Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola, and which is a completely different kind of world, but yet they somehow were balanced to each other. And being able to learn how to be in those worlds and then to eventually build my own world, I suppose as an adult, what I do is I try to build these worlds so that I can essentially freeze a moment in time of my past so that I can turn the figure of the phenomena or the phenomenon, whatever it is I'm looking at, on as many sides as possible. And when I share it with people, it's a way for me to share a deep part of my life that if they speak back to me through their experiences in whatever form it comes back to me in, I'm having a conversation that's quite an interesting meta conversation.
We have a number of favorite moments in this film. And, we were trying to decide which ones to ask you about. And there's several moments. And so I'm gonna ask about one here, like the FaceTime call or the layered agricultural report. The process of making the film becomes part of the film. So how intentional was that for you? How do you think about setting and circumstance shaping the work itself?
Yeah, so the film turning back onto itself through those scenes. So I'll kind of like parse through it one by one. The agricultural report was just a happy accident. One of the things that I try to do, no matter where I'm at in the world, is I just try to get in a good run or a good workout because it keeps my emotional equilibrium in a place that basically does not become hostile to other people, you know. So it's important that I work out. Otherwise, it's very hard for me to keep my emotions in my mind disentangled. So in Vietnam was no different. And so I'd go on these runs sometimes in the morning in the neighborhood or further away from the neighborhood, depending upon how far I ran that day. And so one morning I happened to be running and I heard this communist propaganda report blaring from the megaphone mounted on a telephone pole. And I just thought it was so strange. And I stopped and I stood there and I listened to it. And I think the only way for me to describe that and then the subsequent editorial decision to put it in the film, I'm going to invoke the late, great David Lynch and say, it was just strange and wonderful, strange and wonderful. I don't know what the hell it was. I just felt it to be something that I knew would be something I needed to record. So I just went ahead and I grabbed my phone and I recorded it, and later on I made it into the edit. And how it kind of was threaded through the edit is that the burst of my physical activity running follows a moment when I read the letter and it's very tense. And I just chose that as an editorial choice to kind of give the audience a bit of reprieve through their understanding of what an activity I did to sort of, disengage from stress would be. And so there's that agricultural report. And then the FaceTime with my partner, Annette, was also a happy accident. I happened to be shooting an establishing shot of the Virgin Mary statue in the cemetery where my mother was buried, and she called, and I had the camera on, so it captured that audio. And later, for me, something about the way in which that fit into the panning shot of the soccer game coming from that rural street scene where you don't even know exactly where I'm at, but the world completely splits in two, and you have basically one that's rural Vietnam and one that's this like lit up crazy looking green, soccer field. Something about that is also a diversion from the tension. And then I guess the phone call with my partner seemed to kind of ground a part of the character that is me in the world that makes me happiest, which is being, with my love and having her as a part of my life. And so something about the weaving of that together made sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to anybody else, but that's just kind of how I felt, I mean, I'm not, unfortunately, one of those, like, I'm one of those musicians that doesn't read music. I just know how to play it. So
We are going to open it up to audience questions. No pressure. I have plenty more I can ask, but I just wanted to make sure that if there are questions in the room, that we got to them. We've got one over here. I want to make sure that we give you mics, so anyone online can hear you. We have got people just, look at this staff.
yeah.
So you mentioned some directors and some films
Mhm.
that were important to you. And I'm wondering, and specifically, what are some of your favorite directors and films and why?
And I'm just going to repeat this for anyone online who had trouble hearing. So directors that were particularly influential in Vu's life. Did I get that right?
Yes. That's what I heard. Great question, Bob. Yeah, so I am, so I grew up watching the films of Sergio Leone, which really was, I think, for me, the most formative of my film watching experience. And I can't tell you, in addition to having just being completely mesmerized by The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, or for, A Few Dollars More, or Once Upon a Time in the West. What a joy it is for me to be lost in a movie theater, because it feels as if, like, when I'm watching a film in a movie theater, and that for me is like the ultimate film going experience. I mean, it's a very sad situation we find ourselves in when no one wants to leave their house anymore. And because they have, like, an 8-foot screen television, that's just in their bedroom. And so that's kind of the direction of our culture, I guess. That's fine, I suppose. But I happen to like the traditional theater. And so as a kid, there was no greater joy than for me to, like, come into a movie theater and sit down and then just sort of like stare up at that big screen with all the lights flickering. And then all of a sudden, then the lights come on. I was like, wait. And then I have all these questions, and I think to myself, did that happen or what? And it's almost like I got lost in the story, and I'm just now coming out of it. And there's something about that shift from being completely, enamored and lost in the reality of a story, and then coming out the other side and going, oh, wow, that's something I have to think about, or something that I want to think more, or discover, through conversation with others. That is a tremendous joy. So later, when I was able to watch films of the films of Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola, I had that experience as well. So Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola are the great American directors that I absolutely love. I think that American cinema in the 70s is one of the great golden decades of cinema. I mean, it was really for the world. So, I mean, during that period of time, you had Bernardo Bertolucci, Federico Fellini working, and those are incredible influences of mine as well. For other world cinema, I really love the films of Wong Kar-wai, who's an incredible Hong Kong director. He's such a lyrical, magical director, especially when he's in collaboration with the Australian DP Christopher Doyle. Their work is just one of those things. It's just an experience of beauty to behold, really. And then I also really love the work of the Danish director Lars von Trier. He's a very controversial director. A lot of people find him to be extremely polarizing, but I happen to think he's a genius. And films like Breaking the Waves or Zentropa or The Element of Crime, later films such as Antichrist and Melancholia. Most recently, I think the last film he did was The House That Jack Built. He's a fascinating director, and it just, like, and here's the thing that people will find to be really peculiar. I like getting punched in the gut, you know, when I have an experience with art. I want to literally and figuratively feel some kind of physical reaction from a story or an experience, because I just want to know deep down that there is something there that's of value and of real importance. Some people might call me, you know, sort of masochistic in that way, and maybe that's not far off from the truth, but I'll let my partner figure that out if that is true. There's lots of safe words in my home.
There's a couple more questions. So we've got one here and then one here.
Yeah, I think it was very interesting to watch. I have a question kind of tying to this with your some of your favorite directors and so forth. And that you mentioned Sergio Leone and those things. What I noticed most about your film right off the bat is the absence of what you're telling, and it's not too far of a stretch of why you like some of the filmmakers that you've listened to or that you listed. But so I think my question is, first of all, I guess I should say, I appreciate what you left out so far of what I've seen of this film. And as a style and as a storyteller, I find that fascinating. And what you said a minute ago about that film, more than other art, it has the ability to do this, because you can film as much as you want, you can beep out as much as you want, and you put in a 2-hour thing or a 10-minute film, whatever. But so the absence of information is so powerful, and especially in film. My question for you is, High Plains Drifter. We don't know why this guy has come back. I mean, he gets some clues and so forth. You know, just to tap into one movie. Are you comfortable in doing a life about your mother, that you're allowing people to fill in the information, like some of your favorite filmmakers do? Say, we will let the viewer fill in all this, which I think is fascinating part of film. I like films that leave a lot out, because then I can create, why is this, you know, that's maybe the gut punch you're talking about. I was like, maybe that guy's it, but this is a real life story about a murder of a young woman and your mother and so forth. So I'm curious how comfortable you are if you leave too much out. Having people say, well, what was wrong with what was going on here? So I don't know if I'm saying this in my question, because I talk a lot about the power of absence in
Right.
any art. But,
yeah, that's a really great question. I like that a lot. And yeah, negative space is informed by positive space. So if you look at a figure, you know, you can basically understand what the shape and the lines and the definition of something is based upon, or the absence of that thing that the positive space points at. So negative and positive space in terms of lack or absence of information versus present information is an interesting idea, but you have to be able to shape the positive space, the information that is there, in such a way as to define the negative space. So that's kind of like a whatever, art theory meandering that I don't need to go into. But to directly address your question, which is more of a personal question about how I feel my mother's story and her legacy can exist in a film that does have quite a bit of ambiguity and may cause an audience to sort of be misdirected, or perhaps maybe not know well enough of her life or her story or our story together as to maybe be, I don't know, not properly respectful of her as a part of my life. And I think that's a really kind of interesting personal question, because I obviously have had to deal with my mother being present through her absence, which is a really interesting thing. I mean, Freud really kind of he had such great things he said about how in Totem and Taboo, he talks about how the father that is killed by the band of sons, who covet the horde of or the limited amount of females in the tribe, it becomes stronger in death. Freud's an interesting cat, and I really love his work and have been influenced quite a bit by his thinking about things as well, even though, yeah, there's some argument about him being full of shit in some areas. But anyway, the thing about somebody being stronger in death than in life is, I think, the theme that I want to hone in on. And so my mother's presence in my life has only increased in its presence over the past few years for obvious reasons. And so, in a way, I have this sort of, I'm an interlocutor with a dead woman through my memories, through particularly how my aunt, as you see her in the film, describes to me who my mother was and what their relationship was. And so, yeah, it is a kind of weird ground to be walking on when I do feel like I want to honor my mother. I want to do what's right for her memory and her legacy. But I think, you know, if I'm gonna like sort of play this game of having dialogue with a dead woman, I think she would say, son, you know, I'm proud of the fact that you really have pursued your dreams and are telling this story. I want you to tell the story that really makes your heart sing. And so I would say that whatever it is that I've offered up about her life through this story, I don't feel insecure in the least about a false interpretation, because whatever that false interpretation is, I don't think it's anything that's going to be personally offensive to me or anything that would be objectionable to the honor of her memory. Because anything that people might formulate for themselves about her life, I feel that there's enough positive space of what I'm doing as a filmmaker to at least give them, I think, a general territory of understanding about her that I will be perfectly fine with.
There was a question here.
Yeah.
Let's get you a mic.
Gut punch.
Gut punch.
Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, one of my favorites, Apocalypse Now. It's weird that I didn't even mention that. I mean, that's one of my favorite films of all time. Lawrence of Arabia, too. Yeah, classic. I love classic American epics or European or British epics like Lawrence of Arabia. They don't make films like that anymore. Everything's like kind of, you know, I don't know, feels algorithmic and, you know, focus grouped, heavy kind of bean counting nonsense.
The tragedy in those movies, sorry.
Yeah.
I think that's where that goes. So my question to you is, I know we've had some personal conversations, and I know your commitment to restorative justice. And where that's leading you, how this film and what's happening in your life is leading you in that direction. But as I watch the film unfold and I watch you describe it, I'm curious, do you know how it ends? I mean, is this something that's just unfolding as you go, or do you have an end plan?
Yeah.
The question was, where are we going? Do you know how it ends? Is there an end plan in this film?
Yes.
Yeah, you know, when there's a great scene in Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut where Tom Cruise gets basically led by the arm by these two hot models who ask him, you know, where they're going, and you know, he says where the rainbow ends, and where the rainbow ends happens to be the mask shop that he ends up picking up the mask to go to that wild orgy there in a mansion. And so I don't know, where is this film gonna go? A wild orgy. Is that out of place? Is it out of place? I don't know. I mean,
See that one? I have to say, I didn't see that one coming.
yeah, I'm still working through some ideas. It's rough. It's rough. So where
I don't know that we can screen that. At UAS.
Yeah, so I thank you for the question, because that is a very apropos question. What's interesting about this project is that it's a living documentary. And so what I've screened is a 18-minute film, and that 18-minute film will basically now just live on as an exhibition component of my public talks, because that's kind of where it is going to best reside professionally and creatively for me. Any filmmaker that wants to have a career, and God permitting, God willing, one day maybe that'll be me, wants to work with feature films, because that's just the narrative container that is best for you to access the tools that you want to tell stories with, you know, the breadth of complexity and time that you want. So because I discovered when I was at the University of Washington that this whole, presenting the film and then giving a formal talk was kind of the magic sauce for people. I said to myself, okay, well, maybe I should just keep the short film as the exhibition component and just set my sights on really what I want to do, which is to make this feature film, which is going to be maybe a 90-minute, 100-minute film. And that frees me up to kind of just think about the film as a living documentary, because as things are developing in my life, such as the contract job that I'll be doing, working in directly in restorative justice back in Portland, maybe here in Alaska too. We'll see, but things like that will then become a part of the unfurling story of the feature film. Things like whether or not I'm actually going to have an opportunity to speak with the man that killed my mother as that's developing. And that's kind of a whole process that is really, really hard, because I'm just simply, unable to fund that project at the moment, because it's very expensive hiring a PI. Apparently, I didn't know anything about private investigators, so those things all kind of are contributing to the living tapestry of this documentary. And what's next for me is that I'm going to be going back to Vietnam in probably February of 2026, and I'm going to shoot the second chapter of this documentary that will follow my mother's boat journey from the mouth of the Mekong River out into the South China Sea. I'm going to document that passage because it's sort of like a cinematic ritual for me to try and see the world through my mother's eyes. I simply want to know what she might have seen as a young woman when she decided to basically risk her life, my life, and collaborate with all these other fellow Vietnamese refugees and basically squeeze themselves into a tiny boat and then sail out to the South China Sea, where we almost died. Were it not for the fact that we had this, spotting of a offshore oil rig, a profound serendipitous moment, we would have definitely been toast. So I want to be able to film that part of it and tell that story. And so the living documentary is simply just me engaging in the various aspects of restorative justice, remembering, understanding my mother's life. And, with restorative justice, going back to that, there's also the practice that I will be engaging in for other people, not just for my own story. So all those things will go into the feature film, and it's an ongoing process. You can learn more about it, pick up the flyer on your way out if you'd like to know what we're doing. We're actively trying to get this film done. So yeah, any support, any referrals, if you happen to know like a really hot shot LA producer, that kind of thing, let me know.
Are there any other questions?
I really enjoy listening to the music
Hmm.
that you chose in the film. And I'm just wondering, maybe just talk about one of those pieces and why you chose to integrate that at a particular moment in the film.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about Stranger in Paradise, which is, I believe, a song from the musical Kismet, Kismet. I've never seen it. I think it has something to do with Arabian Nights or something like that. And that song, Stranger in Paradise, not like I'm the kind of person that really just gets into Tony Bennett. Like I don't jam out to Tony Bennett or anything like that, which may shock people. I know I look like I'm the kind of guy that does that, but I'll have you know that Tony Bennett is not high on my playlist. I don't have any records or anything. I do enjoy like the classic crooner and all of that. It's not so much that song reflects the most authentic aesthetic I have when it comes to music. It's that there is a kind of character, atmosphere, and irony about that song that really spoke to me when I considered how I wanted to open the film. And I had also been inspired by it because I went to go see Sun Ra, the Sun Ra Orchestra, absent of Sun Ra, of course, because he's passed away now for several decades, I believe. But I saw the Sun Ra Orchestra in its current iteration at the Hollywood Theater in Portland, and they covered Stranger in Paradise. And I was so blown away by their cover. And I asked my friend who was with me, I'm like, what is this song, Stranger in Paradise? And she said, "What, you've never heard of Stranger in Paradise?" I'm like, "No, I've never heard of this." She's like, "Oh yeah, it's a classic." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I started listening to different versions of Stranger in Paradise. And slowly, I started to fall in love with it because there's something that's so gorgeous about this idea of a person who has kind of been enchanted by the most miraculous unveiling of a future in life that not even his wildest dreams could make contact with. And so the irony of it is kind of speaking to my being a refugee, having gone through the crisis of being lost in the vast, unforgiving South China Sea with my mother, and then arriving here in the United States to, at that point in my life, watch her being dug up by a group of people, one of whom, I don't know if you caught this in the film, was there when they laid her into the ground. His name is Pat Balfe. And I tried to engage him in a potential interview, but he wasn't up for it. So I accepted his respectful declining of my request. And so the irony of it is that I'm standing there watching my mom being disinterred, and I'm a stranger in this paradise that is supposed to be the American dream, is supposed to be a life that my mother made for me. And the irony isn't just on that very kind of ostensible juxtaposition of like contrasting experiences of the refugee and the reality of what happened to her and to me as a kid, but on a more, I don't know, deep level, the irony is that I am actually a stranger in paradise. I am actually a person that is extraordinarily blessed. I am actually a person that has a lot to be grateful for. And so on one level, there's this irony that kind of is cynically looking at my life and, oh, he's there, for his mother's disinterment. But on another level, on a deeper, truly genuine level where I'm at in my life, I am truly a stranger in paradise. I have lived a life where I have nothing but gratitude for what I have been given, and I have nothing but gratitude for the kind of love and support that I receive. And perhaps maybe that is kind of what sort of pulls me out of the mire, the muck and the hole of tragedy. When I find myself there in my own, self-despair.
That's a beautiful answer. I just had to interrupt you and say that. As a theater director, I just want you to know that I spend exactly that long on every song I choose for every moment of every play I've ever directed. I think about every sound clip for at least that long. I love that answer that you just gave. I just needed to say that. I really loved everything you just said. Do we have any other questions? Thank you all so much for joining us for Evening at Egan Night 1. I'm really excited for this year's Evening at Egan's, for this fall's Evening at Egan's. Allison, you probably know, our next date, is it October 10th? Do I have that right?
Yeah, glacial outburst flood.
Yeah, we have a talk on glacial outburst flood. Dr. Aaron Hood and Dr. Jason, is it Jason? Do I have that right? Okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't saying anything incorrect to you because my brain is a little jostled right now. My brain is absorbing all of this right now. Dr. Aaron Hood and Dr. Jason Amundsen are coming to talk with us on another Friday night at 7 p.m. with more cookies and coffee. And they did some really beautiful things for this community this fall and developed a brand new website that I bet a lot of you accessed. I know I accessed it a lot. And so they're going to talk about their new research that and grants enabled them to do for us in Juneau and give us the latest updates on that. So I hope that you come and join us again. And thank you so much for being here this evening, and give yourselves a round of applause and boo.
Thank you very much.